Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on Eleanor and Park by Rowell, or I'm not sure how to say her name. This is a contemporary young adult fiction novel that follows two teenagers, Eleanor and Park. Eleanor is sort of a new kid. The story starts out with her getting on the school bus as they're heading to school on her first day, and she kind of just looks around and she doesn't really know where to sit. It looks like every seat is occupied. She tries to take a seat and someone yells at her that she's taken someone's seat, and so she ends up sitting next to Park, who had an entire seat to himself. They basically just go the whole ride without talking to each other at all. Eventually they start to become at least a little bit more friendly to each other. They're both intrigued by each other and you slowly see a relationship start to develop. This book was just released and I'm not someone who buys books right away unless they're like a part of a series and I'm waiting for the next installment. But then John Green did a review of this book in the New York Times. I'll leave a link to that down in the description. And the way he described it just really interested me. I'm not someone who likes everything that John Green likes. Like when he recommends books, I'm usually a little bit wary of it because he usually likes things that I don't necessarily like, or he prefers things that I don't necessarily prefer. Not all the time, of course, but there's always just those differences, and I can usually tell when he's describing books he's enjoying whether or not those books are going to be for me. And the way he was describing this book, I knew it was for me. I love contemporary fiction and I don't love necessarily romances in books, but this one I thought was done really well. There are so many things about this book that just really hit a chord with me that made me really love it. There's the fact that Eleanor does not look like the stereotypical girl. You know, she's described as being a little bit bigger and curvier than most girls. She has like red, curly, big hair. She doesn't dress like the other kids. There's the fact that Park is half Asian, which is great because you very rarely see people of color in young adult novels. This book takes place in the 1980s and this isn't like Ready Player One where there's just all of these 80s references. They do make references here and there, but some of the references are kind of like to classic things, like they bond over music, and so they talk about things like the Sex Pistols and U2 and David Bowie and just sort of these things that are almost timeless. And while you're reading this book, you don't feel like you're necessarily in the 80s. Like sometimes I would actually forget that and then they would make a reference to something and I'm like, oh yeah, this is taking place in the 80s. Like this story just feels so timeless and so classic in that way. The story is also told from the point of view of both Eleanor and Park. It goes back and forth between their points of view and it isn't necessarily split up by chapters. While each chapter will switch the perspective from where it was before, it also sometimes switches perspective in the middle of a scene. And so you'll see a situation happening between these two people and you'll see it from both sides, and it's a really great storytelling device. I feel a lot of times with teenagers or even just anyone who are in relationships, a lot of times you are sort of assuming a lot of things. You assume that the other person wants specific things, or you assume that when a person is upset it's about this specific reason, and then you don't realize that it's really not. There's something else going on that you might not realize, and you see that a lot happening with Eleanor and Park. Eleanor will be upset about something and Park won't completely understand why, and just sort of that comparison about two different people are seeing the same thing in two completely different ways. I bought this book on Monday after work and I ended up finishing it Tuesday night. I literally could not put it down because I really wanted to know what was happening to these characters and how things were going to turn out. There are a lot of conflicts in this book, and it isn't even just like conflicts about them being a couple. It's also about their family lives. You know, Eleanor has some issues from her past. You find out pretty early on in the book that she was kicked out of her home. Now she's back in her home and you don't necessarily know why that is all happening, and there's this sort of division that's happened now between her and her family, or there's sort of like this wall of differences, like the way things were before and the way things are now are not the same. And so you see all of that happening as well, and there's just a lot of really great things that are brought up in this story that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting it kind of to just be a teen romance book, but there is just so much more going on to that. These characters feel so much fuller than that. In the end, I give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I feel like this is just a really well written, really well done young adult novel that people need to give a chance. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you plan on reading this book, or if you have read this book, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.